They say history is a river, and like all rivers, it is shaped by those who control its flow. In the heart of East Africa, along the lush shores of Lake Victoria, there rose a kingdom that refused to be merely carried by the currents of time. It was a kingdom that built its own course, bending history to its will, guided by rulers who were not just kings, but custodians of divine authority. This was Buganda, the kingdom of the Kabakas, a land where power was not inherited lightly, where tradition intertwined with innovation, and where identity became so deeply rooted that centuries of change could never erase it. Buganda was not simply a kingdom, it was a phenomenon, one of the greatest pre-colonial states of Africa, and its story is as captivating as it is complex. The history of Africa is often distorted, reduced to stereotypes or dismissed as a land waiting for others to define it. Yet the story of Buganda shatters that false narrative. Long before colonial maps carved borders into the continent, Buganda had carved its destiny with purpose, expanding from a cluster of clans into an empire with a system of governance so sophisticated that Europeans, upon encountering it, were forced to admit its brilliance, even as they plotted its downfall. To speak of Buganda is to speak of the Kabakas, the rulers whose names echo through time, shaping the identity of a nation. They were kings, warriors, diplomats, reformers, visionaries, and sometimes tyrants. But above all, they were the heartbeat of their people. Buganda's rise began centuries ago, around the 14th century, in a region blessed with fertile soils, abundant rainfall, and access to the vast waters of Lake Victoria. Geography was Buganda's first ally. The land could sustain dense populations, support agriculture, and foster trade. This abundance created the foundation for stability and growth. But geography alone does not build kingdoms. People and leadership do. Buganda's society was originally organized around clans, each with its totems, traditions, and authority. Yet over time, unity began to emerge under the leadership of the Kabakas, who skillfully transformed fragmented clan loyalties into loyalty to a throne. Unlike many other kingdoms where rulers were distant or symbolic, the Kabakas embedded themselves deeply in the lives of their subjects. The Kabaka was not just the political leader, but also a spiritual figure. He was believed to embody the soul of the kingdom, the bridge between the people and the divine. The very word Kabaka carried weight far beyond kingship. It symbolized a ruler who bore the responsibility for the well-being of the land, the fertility of the soil, and the prosperity of his people. To betray the Kabaka was to betray Buganda itself. This fusion of political and spiritual power gave the Kabakas extraordinary authority, and they wielded it with both strategy and force. Buganda expanded steadily, absorbing smaller chiefdoms and extending its reach around Lake Victoria. The kingdom's rise was not accidental. It was engineered by leaders who understood the value of both military might and diplomacy. Armies of Buganda were formidable, but equally formidable was their system of governance. At the heart of this system was the Lukiko, a council of nobles, chiefs, and advisors who debated policies and offered counsel to the Kabaka. Far from being autocrats in isolation, the Kabakas presided over a political machine that distributed power across offices, creating a structure that was both centralized and flexible. Chiefs were appointed by the Kabaka and rotated frequently to prevent any one clan or family from growing too powerful. This was not chaos, it was control. It was a masterstroke of political engineering that kept the Kabaka at the center of authority, while ensuring loyalty from those who sought his favor. The economy of Buganda thrived on agriculture, particularly the cultivation of bananas, which became the staple food and allowed dense populations to flourish. With agriculture secure, the kingdom turned outward, trading with neighbors, and eventually with Arab and Swahili traders who brought cloth, beads, and firearms in exchange for ivory and slaves. This connection to wider networks placed Buganda firmly on the map of global commerce long before Europeans arrived. The Kabakas, keenly aware of the benefits and dangers of trade, played a delicate game, welcoming external goods while ensuring foreign powers did not erode their sovereignty. One cannot tell the story of Buganda without speaking of its legendary Kabakas. Kabaka Kintu is often regarded as the founder of Buganda's dynastic line, a figure shrouded in both history and myth. His arrival and establishment of rule symbolized the unification of clans under a central throne. Then came Kabaka Chimera, who solidified the dynasty's legitimacy, and later Kabaka Junju, whose reign saw Buganda's armies grow in strength. But perhaps no Kabaka embodies Buganda's power and ambition more than Kabaka Mutesa Warman in the 19th century. Kabaka Mutesa I ruled during a time when European explorers, missionaries and traders were pressing deeper into Africa. Where other rulers saw only danger, Mutesa saw opportunity. He was a master diplomat, playing Arabs, missionaries and explorers against one another, ensuring Buganda received firearms, recognition, and strategic alliances without being swallowed whole. When Henry Morton Stanley, the famous European explorer, visited Mutesa, he was struck by the Kabaka's intelligence and charisma. Stanley wrote about Mutesa with awe, recognizing that this was no ordinary ruler, but a statesman who understood the global chessboard on which Africa was being played. It was Mutesa who invited Christian missionaries into his kingdom, setting the stage for a religious revolution that would both enrich and destabilize Buganda in the years to come. Religion became one of the most dramatic turning points in Buganda's history. The arrival of Islam through Arab traders, followed by Catholic and Protestant missionaries, transformed the spiritual landscape of the kingdom. Suddenly, the Kabakas had to contend not only with political rivalries, but with religious divisions among their people. Kabaka Mwanga II, Mutesa's successor, faced this storm head-on. His reign became infamous for the Uganda Martyrs, a group of Christian converts executed for refusing to renounce their faith and defy the Kabaka Almwes authority. To some, Mwanga was a tyrant resisting inevitable change. To others, he was a king defending Buganda and sovereignty against the creeping influence of foreign powers cloaked in religion. This remains one of the most controversial episodes in Buganda's history, sparking debates that still echo today. Were the martyrs heroes of faith, or were they pawns in a larger struggle for control of Buganda's destiny? The late 19th century brought Buganda face to face with colonial ambitions. The British, eyeing East Africa as part of their empire, saw in Buganda both an obstacle and an opportunity. The kingdom was too strong to be easily conquered, yet too strategically located to ignore. The British solution was cunning. They would not destroy Buganda, but co-opt it. Through treaties, diplomacy, and pressure, Buganda became a protectorate under the British Crown in 1894. Yet unlike many African states that were crushed outright, Buganda retained a degree of autonomy. The Kabaka remained a symbol of unity and leadership, and the Buganda Agreement of 1900 formalized a relationship that gave the kingdom privileges within the colonial framework. Land was redistributed, chiefs gained power, and Buganda became a cornerstone of British administration in Uganda. This uneasy partnership produced mixed legacies. On one hand, Buganda maintained its cultural identity, its monarchy, and its institutions even under colonial rule. On the other hand, divisions deepened between chiefs and peasants, between religions, and between those loyal to tradition and those embracing modernity. The Kabakas themselves became both collaborators and resistors, navigating a colonial world that sought to reshape Africa while using Buganda's influence to its advantage. The 20th century was a time of great transformation. Kabaka Mutesa II became a central figure in Uganda's path to independence. Exiled by the British in 1953 for resisting their attempts to reduce Buganda's autonomy, he returned triumphantly 2 years later, greeted by massive crowds who saw him not just as a king, but as a symbol of resistance. When Uganda gained independence in 1962, Mutesa II became the nation's first president, a rare blending of traditional kingship with modern statehood. Yet this union was fragile. Tensions between Buganda's monarchy and Uganda's central government exploded under Milton Obote, who in 1966 ordered an attack on the Kabaka's palace, forcing Mutesa II into exile once more. The monarchy was abolished in 1967, stripping Buganda of its crown. But history has a way of circling back. In 1993, after years of political upheaval, The monarchy was restored in Uganda, and Kabaka Ronald Muwenda Mutebi II was enthroned. Though his role today is largely cultural rather than political, the significance of the Kabaka endures. The Kabaka remains the custodian of Buganda's traditions, the embodiment of its history, and the voice of a people whose kingdom has outlasted empires, colonialism, and dictatorships. The story of Buganda and its Kabakas is not simply the story of a kingdom, it is the story of resilience. It challenges assumptions about African governance, sophistication, and identity. It shows how a kingdom could adapt, negotiate, and survive in the face of enormous pressures. And it forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, that Africa's past was not empty, that its kingdoms were not primitive, and that its rulers were as complex and strategic as any in the world. Buganda thrives today not just as a historical memory but as a living culture. Its language, Luganda, is spoken by millions. Its traditions, ceremonies, and symbols remain central to Ugandan life. The palace at Mengo still stands, the tombs at Kasubi still echo with the spirits of past Kabakas, and the pride of being Ganda remains strong among its people. This continuity is itself a form of defiance. Despite centuries of external pressure, Buganda never allowed itself to be erased. Its Kabakas, whether on the throne, in exile, or in memory, have carried the spirit of the kingdom forward. And perhaps that is the greatest legacy of all, that a people who once built one of Africa's greatest kingdoms continue to live by its heartbeat today. The story of Buganda and its Kabakas is not finished. It lives on in every song, every ritual, every story passed from parent to child. It lives on in the resilience of a people who remember that their kings were more than rulers. They were symbols of identity, faith, and unity. It lives on as a reminder that history is not a river that washes Africa aside, but a current that Africa itself shapes, directs, and commands. Buganda was and still is a kingdom of power. Its Kabakas were and still are guardians of heritage. And its story is and always will be one of the greatest tales of Africa's enduring genius.